This week on To the Contrary.
First, diverse members of Congress lead the gun control debate, but in a destructive direction? Then, Donald Trump's candidacy and a nation divided about immigration.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, after the sit-in.
Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine says she's been working hard to keep the gun control debate nonpartisan. She called this week's 25-hour sit-in by House Democrats a setback. Collins says the sit-in diminished bipartisan support for her gun control bill in the Senate. Her compromise bill fell 8 votes short when she tried to bring it to the Senate floor. Some 170 House Democrats staged the sit-in to force a vote in their chamber, with no luck. Just about any gun control bill would fail in the Republican-controlled House, but Speaker Paul Ryan won't allow a vote. A recent CNN ORC poll finds some 90% of the public supports tighter background checks for gun buyers. 58% of women favor stricter gun control laws versus 52% of men. 60% of women favored a ban on assault weapons versus 48% of men.
So, Genevieve Wood, why are diverse lawmakers more likely to favor gun control?
Well, I think because they're more likely to be Democrats, and Democrats are more likely not to be very strong supporters of the Second Amendment.
And it's also because they're more likely to represent the majority of the American people, and the majority of the American people do not support the existing gun laws.
Well, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think diverse individuals have that perspective because of gang violence and drug violence and the types of things. So I don't know that it's a political thing. I think it's, we want to support the Second Amendment, but at the same time have that sensitivity.
I think there are also many diverse members of Congress who are from urban districts where the toll of gun violence is much more apparent, and so they're hearing more urgency from their constituents.
But, I'm just curious. Obviously, this was, a bit of a publicity stunt by the Democrats. Paul Ryan. But wait a second. Paul Ryan said that on the House floor. He showed the request for donations that went out. A trick, by the way, that, I get them from both sides.
Yeah.
I've seen things like that.
And they usually happen in election years.
No, but Republicans do them, too, in fairness.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little weird. He should have said, wait a minute, we also do this, but they're doing it, to look more even-handed.
Well,
but there are 81,000 people on the no-fly list, only 1,000 Americans. Mm-hmm. That's a tiny fracture. Why does it matter so much to the NRA and Republicans to protect 1,000 Americans? Many times that many have died at the hands of assault weapons.
I think we should be concerned about anybody's constitutional rights, whether it's one person, 100 people, or 10,000 people. But that aside,
as opposed to their lives.
But this goes to the heart of it. The Democrats in the Senate didn't allow what you just talked about, Susan Collins' bill, to get across the finish line. Okay, so if the
Democrats in the Senate?
So if the Democrats were really concerned about this overall gun control legislation, keep in mind, back when Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House and Democrats ran the Congress, ran the House, and gun violence was actually at a higher level than it is today, Nancy Pelosi did not get gun control through the Congress. So I do think this is more politics right now than it is anything else. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the discussion, but I don't think it's the proper response to what happened in Orlando. If you want to fight terrorism, there are much stronger ways to do it than going after gun control.
The United States of America is not unlike any other country, and the rest of the world have responded to similar situations with gun control laws that have proven to be effective. A point of data that I thought that was very interesting, in 1999, the majority of gun owners said, I want my guns because I want to go hunting. In 2016, the majority of gun owners want their guns because they want to be protected. Protected of whom? By whom? The other fact that is really interesting is there's a lesser number of gun owners. Now, there's only 37% of Americans that own guns, but they own more guns than before. So it's almost like we are creating this army of people that are fighting someone and protecting themselves from someone. And as you said about diverse lawmakers and people in urban centers, we in urban centers are feeling that these people are arming themselves to protect themselves from us. So it's a scary situation. And for the Republicans to take these extreme positions that you cannot even do background check and ban people that are in no-fly lists from owning guns is outrageous. And it's
From purchasing.
Exactly.
From purchasing. Your thoughts?
Really, when you think about it, I mean, I do think Senator Collins was right. This was a setback. She was trying to be bipartisan, and at the end of the day, when you add everything up, you look at what happened, for example, with the Aurora, with entertainment. You looked at what happened with Charleston. You looked at what happened with Sandy Hook. I mean, this is just, we have to do in depth, and it has to be bipartisan. And I think the sit-in, like you said, I think it was a publicity stunt. It did draw a lot of attention.
I
loved it. Bring issues. I'm sure you did. But at the end of the day, we have the no-fly 1,000 people. That's important. But terrorism is more about bigotry. Yes. Charleston was about race. Orlando potentially, and I believe it was more about gays than it was about terrorism, although he used the ISIS as an excuse. Mental health.
But he also
Virginia
railed
Tech.
against gay people. I mean,
well, he did because he probably had some sexual identity issues.
Right.
But this is the thing, and then you have mental illness. You look at Virginia Tech. We look at all these high schools and all the elementary schools. So it's much bigger than the no-fly zone or the no-fly and the FBI.
Because most of the people you just mentioned would not have been on the no-fly list.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Thank you.
And that's an excellent argument for why we need to do a lot more than use the no-fly list to control guns. Yes.
Well, the FBI watch list is 2.9 million people, and there are a lot more than 1,000 Americans on that list.
And the vast majority of those people have no known connection to terrorism. So there are real civil liberties concerns, but it's a little bit rich for the Republicans to be raising those civil liberties concerns only now, when they've been totally fine to have all those people be on the list until now and not be able to fly, which is arguably a much bigger imposition on one's life than the ability to own a gun. To the point about this being a publicity stunt, it is that, but that's sort of what the Democrats have been resigned to because of obstructionism. I think if you compare this, for example, to the shutdown in 2013, that was not supported by the American public. The point of that shutdown was an attempt to deny health care to people. In this case, we're having, the Democrats have been trying to do something that is supported by the vast majority of the American people, which is to close background check loopholes, well, they're not actually moving on the assault weapons ban, but that is something that's also supported by a majority of Americans. And so in this case, they are trying to raise attention to the fact that the will of the American people is being obstructed, and they have nothing else to do but sit down on the floor of Congress.
Look, I think they could do more things, like when they were in charge, actually bring forth gun control legislation and pass it.
Sure.
But they didn't do that, and they didn't do that. And Nancy Pelosi was in charge. They had a full majority, and they didn't do it.
They didn't have a two-thirds majority.
Well, no, not 2/3, but kind of like Barack Obama didn't do anything on immigration when he had majorities in Congress and promised he was going to do that. So look, there's a lot of this. It's easier, frankly, to be in the minority and complain.
Wait.
Yes, I want immigration reform. Absolutely, not what Barack Obama probably wants. But I would like to have immigration reform. But let me say this. Let's go back to terrorism for a second. If this really is about terrorism and you want to talk about gun control related to that, France has a lot of gun control. Did not stop what happened, that carnage that happened in Paris. And yes, those people get it off the black market.
France. We have how many this year?
Almost
how many
1,000
have we had
terrorist attack, and let's talk
it's
about
gun
86
violence. People a day dying of gun violence.
In the United States, not in France.
But some of that
France
includes suicides, among other things. Gun violence actually from crime is down from where it was before, and we have more guns. You're right. More people, private citizens, own guns today than did 2 years ago, 10 years ago, and gun violence is down. The problem in these urban communities is those are some of the strongest gun-controlled areas of the country where guns are banned, and the only people that have them are the bad
guns. Guns are not banned because they cannot be banned by federal law. Let's correct that, and less people are owning guns. More people are owning guns.
But can we not agree that whether there's a city ban in effect, as there are tighter gun control laws in the District of Columbia than there are in Virginia or Maryland, but it's perfectly legal to buy, I think, up to 2 handguns a month. You're limited only to 2 handguns a month in Virginia, and all you have to do is drive across a toll-free bridge with your 2 handguns that you bought in Virginia. That just annihilates the efficacy of any gun control law the District of Columbia could put into effect.
No, what it says is when you have certain communities or states where people yes, can own guns and they can protect themselves, you usually have crime going down because people are more scared to break into somebody when they know that home may be protected.
I don't think
when you were in a
data,
completely
but wait a
gun-free
second.
zone.
Congress banned any new data.
So we don't know.
So the fact is, we don't have accurate
of the NRA.
We don't have
that is.
But
we know gun violence is down. We do know that.
But go ahead, Cari.
Yeah, no, again, my point was going to be about the D.C. and then crime has gone up, whether they get the guns. But the point being, if this whole issue is about terrorism, those rules, those laws that they were proposing is not going to solve the matter. We have workplace violence. I mean, hundreds of people get shot in the workplace every year. We have drugs.
It is about gun control.
At least you're being honest about it. At least you're being honest.
Wait. Go ahead.
No, I'm talking about gun control. And I think gun control impact many aspects. And gun control, the American style, by the way, because nobody's going to take the right to own weapons to anybody. It's what kind of guns and how many guns and who should have them, okay? So this is not the kind of law at this moment in this country that you can claim that any community is free of guns, because all communities have guns. So you cannot say, well, these communities have no guns but they still have violence, because it's not true. All communities have guns.
Let's talk a bit about the spike. Yeah. There's a 9% spike in support for some of these gun controls, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there's always a spike. There was a spike after Watertown. Is this one going to hold?
Look, I think what happens with those is you always see a spike because people want to do something, rightly so. You see these terrible things happen and people want to do something.
Newtown, I'm sorry.
But yes, but then what happens is as people start thinking about it, you start having the debate, they start going, will this really work? Would this have really fixed Newtown? And the answer comes out, actually, none of the things that we're talking about would have changed what happened in Newtown. You start seeing the support for those measures dissipate.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I do think that we have to look at background checks. We have to look at a whole myriad of social issues as well as economic issues, while at the same time protecting the Second Amendment.
All right. Please let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnier Bay, at To the Contrary. From gun control to another easy topic, immigration.
Donald Trump's candidacy originally took off due to his stance on illegal immigration and against various groups of immigrants. So it's worth examining how he won 13.3 million votes during the primaries and why so many Americans are angry about immigration policy. A recent article in the conservative National Review Online said, quote, "Open borders have made voters increasingly angry because they reflect the growing lawlessness of society and the willingness of Republicans to capitulate to leftist identity politics. The sense that we are losing control of our own country by the design of politicians is creating a fury," end quote.
The second segment.
So we wondered why this is true and assembled a panel of our regular guests and one expert on immigration to talk about why this is the case and what role the Democratic Party may be playing in creating this so-called fury. So Jessica Vaughan, welcome to the panel, and I want to thank Zoe Carpenter, who was with us for the first part of the show. So tell me, why is this going on? What is it about immigration that rocketed Donald Trump to the top? Late this week, he just made another comment because Britain, the UK, decided to leave the European Union, and he said, we're going to see more of this, I guess referring to his own election that he's predicting in the United States. Why?
Well, people are upset because, first of all, they don't feel that they've had much say in our immigration policy, and that's why the Supreme Court decision to uphold the injunction on President Obama's executive amnesty was met with such a sigh of relief by most people. But it's also because of the numbers. In the last 2 years, according to the Census Bureau, we've received more than 3 million new immigrants to our country. And this is having real effects on people because our economy is not creating enough jobs for even Americans and the legal immigrants who are already here, much less all of these new arrivals. And it's keeping wages down, and it's affecting the quality of life in many communities. And Donald Trump is the candidate who has made this a centerpiece issue for him, and people are responding to that much more than any specific comments he's made, but with the idea that he is going to reverse direction on immigration policy and put the national interest ahead of the special interests who've been driving immigration policy for so long.
Is it possible to speak out against immigration for any number of reasons because of the huge increase in population in the United States? Or, you know, whatever the cultural changes that people may not be comfortable with, without being called a racist? I mean, Trump has made racist remarks. Even Republican GOP members have called him out on that. But can you want less or no immigration without being called a racist?
No, it's pretty hard. That's an attack that's always made by people who support more immigration or less control over immigration. But the fact is that support for lower immigration numbers is not inherently racist. It's about concern over the Americans and legal immigrants who are displaced from job opportunities. It's concern over the population growth that is driven by immigration. It's concern over national security and our country's well-being. So it is, and the fact that most of the people who are most disadvantaged by mass immigration policies are disadvantaged minorities, African Americans, recent immigrants. They're the ones who are competing for those same jobs and services.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's also about who comes in and who comes out of the country. It's about national security. And at the end of the day, it's, you know, I think we all have very diverse backgrounds and diverse perspectives. But
most of our viewers would know, but you're an immigrant from Cuba.
Exactly. But all of us would agree that one of our fundamental values is a sense of fairness. And when somebody cuts in line because they don't want to wait, they don't want to take years to get a visa. I have friends who have been spending years and years trying to get into this country. And then they see somebody cutting in line illegally. You know, it really speaks, and I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump has really resonated with the people. Wait a minute, we have a sense of fairness in this country, and that's illegal. That's not fair. So.
Well, it's a complicated situation. I would say that definitely it's important to have an immigration debate. We need to amend the laws, and I think laws work when they're reflective of the realities of the world. And this country, as much as we would like to close the boundaries and just be just Americans and nobody comes in and everybody's going to be perfect and safe, that is not realistic. The reality of the world is that people are moving in and out, and that laws that are the most effective in protecting the national security and allowing us to have a stable economy are laws that are reflective of the dynamics of migration. That's my first point. Why are many people, when there's in the middle of the debate, accuse the other side as being racist? Is because they use numbers that are not real. Okay, they use numbers that are questionable in terms of the contribution of the immigrants to the economy, in terms of what percentage of the criminals they are. And they portray immigrants in the most negative light when that problem is much bigger than immigrants. So immigrant communities and those of us that support the immigrant communities feel compelled to defend the record, because there may be a lot of things that are wrong, and entering a country illegally may not be the right thing to do, but in part it's happening because the immigration laws are broken. The immigration laws are broken and are not allowing an immigration system that makes sense, that allow people like your family or yourself, I don't know what's your parents or yourself that came from Cuba, the laws allow you to come here legally. That's what it was. But
let me ask you this. Aren't you in essence, and people who support what the Democrats are referring to as immigration reform, but is really legalizing millions of people who entered this country illegally or overstayed visas, mainly student visas, so they entered legally but they're here illegally. And we're not talking about, you know, low-wage, uneducated workers from Central and South America. We're really talking more about Middle Easterners and Europeans. in that case. It isn't reform, which would legalize all these people, another way of saying we should just let anybody in who wants to come. Period.
No, it's not true. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's creating a system that works.
Let me finish. I covered Congress in the late 80s. I watched as Jim Wright, then House Speaker, was on the floor for immigration reform back then was give legalization to everybody who's here illegally, and we won't let any more people in after that. I remember him saying, these are the people who scrub your toilets and wash your floors and don't make a living wage and blah, 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 blah. Lo and behold, it passed. That was 30 years ago.
1986.
And now, yeah, it was the 86 reform. And now we have the same situation again. So
it's far worse, Bonnie.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, no, back then we were talking, Ronald Reagan signed that legislation, and you were right. All the promises were made. We're going to do this now because, look, many people say, yes, they're here illegally. Many came or overstayed visas, but they're here now, and we feel bad about it, okay? And so a lot of people, there is a sympathetic feeling there. But so we tried it that route. I think it was over 3 million folks who are here at that time. Fast forward where we are today, now you've got over maybe 12 million. We don't know the exact number. So it's quadrupled, okay, the problem, because we tried to do it that way. So why would we do the same thing again? And it's your
because people forget history.
Because people forget.
Well, no, it's because the enforcement aspect of that grand bargain that was
Never
made
happened.
in 1986 was never enacted. So policymakers broke the promise that they made to the voters that they were going to be able to fix this problem, and that's why voters are skeptical now.
And one thing the Obama administration has done, and the record is clear, is that he's put a lot of resources in the enforcement and controlling the borders, and the record of immigrants crossing the border illegally is reduced dramatically. So I think he has built. No, he's built a record. He's built a record that can be done in order to be able to solve the other problem. The other thing I want to say is we are talking 11 millions, everybody the same. Well, there are subgroups within those 11 millions, and I disagree with you. You may have welcomed the fact that the Supreme Court was not able to overrule the injunction on DAPA. We, my community, are very upset and very saddened that families are going to be broken. So there are difference of opinions in this table. And they are young people that were born here, were brought here. They didn't even know they were illegal. They learned they were illegal when they were 10, they were 11, okay? Parents that they were going to have the opportunity, the deferment for parents to be able to stay with their children.
But Patricia, here's the problem with all that. I think many people would agree that you don't deal with everybody the same because everybody doesn't have the same problem or came here the same way. But the reality is the president was pushing, was going to do it all on his own, wasn't letting the people have any say in this. And I think the reason that we're having, you were asked at the top of this, why are we where we are today? Nothing usually becomes a problem until all of a sudden it's actually a problem. And people are feeling it in wages. They're feeling it when they look at terrorism. They don't know who's coming in and out of the country. They see things like Orlando, and they're scared. And they go, we don't have control of our borders. And what we saw happen in the UK this week with them voting to get out of Brexit, a big part of that was immigration. They don't feel like they, as the UK, had no control over who could come or not come out. All the 28 countries in the European Union could just come back and forth, and they didn't get to make the decisions about that. People are concerned, and so you may say that's an overreaction, but I think President Obama caused some of that in this country by his overreaction and going around Congress.
Were similar to regulatory measures taken by previous
He also
that
overstepped
is
his bounds there,
not
too.
True. Much larger in impact. We're talking about 5 million people that potentially were going to get work permits. It was an abuse of authority, clearly, and one that was not
seen so by your side, right? Okay.
Well,
I mean, it's not seen so.
The Supreme Court
that way. You see that way.
And the Fifth Circuit as well. Even the president himself said 22 times that he was not a king and cannot do this. He went ahead and did it anyway. It's now been slapped down with good reason. And also the court is endorsing this idea that there can be negative effects to amnesty policies.
No, the court is not endorsing
have
anything.
A right
the court is not endorsing
the Fifth
anything.
Circuit has endorsed it.
No,
I mean,
but
you
the Supreme Court basically.
You're kidding
But
yourself.
let me ask
not
Cari,
appointing the Supreme Court
because
justice.
I see you in the middle on this. How do you solve it?
Well,
I'd like, but each side has different ideas of how to resolve it. But for someone in the middle who sees both sides. How do you see it?
Actually, the way I see it is we really haven't enforced the laws that we already have in place. And I think that's a big problem. And I spent my whole life enforcing employment discrimination laws. And we could say, let's make another law, make another law. I think we have to, first of all, process the laws that we have in place. But I also think that we do need visa reform. I think we need to know the way that the quotas number for people coming in. I think that's outdated. Yes. We need to look at the skill sets that people are bringing in here. We need to look at knowledge-based workers, technical workers, and as opposed to, well, let's get these many people from this part.
Quickly, Jessica, we only have a few seconds left, but I cut you off.
That's okay. We do need to reform our legal immigration system as well and restore immigration levels to more traditional levels that are good for our country, not for special interests.
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter. Visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.